Welcome back, everybody. For this deep dive, we're going to be jumping headfirst into the world of leadership psychology.
It's a really fascinating area.
Oh, it is. It's a huge topic, and to help me navigate all the different twists and turns, I've got with me an expert in the field.
Happy to be here.
Glad to have you. Now, we've got a stack of academic texts here, and we're going to try to distill the key takeaways.
Should be fun.
It will be fun and maybe even a little challenging. So, yeah, we're going to cover all sorts of things from team dynamics and fairness to the impact of power, the whole legacy thing.
Looking forward to it.
Me too. Our first source actually presents a pretty interesting challenge to traditional views of leadership.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it suggests that we maybe give leaders too much credit when things go well.
I see.
And too much blame when they don't.
Right. So that's that idea of the leader attribution error, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, where we tend to overemphasize the role of the leader in either the success or failure of the team and sort of forget about all the other factors that are at play.
It's easy to do, though, right?
Absolutely. Especially when you have a really dynamic, charismatic leader.
Right.
People kind of get swept up in that.
Right. You just assume like, oh, they must be the reason for all this success.
Exactly.
So if it's not enough to just have, a great leader at the helm, what else matters?
Well, Richard Hagman, who really delved into this concept, suggests that maybe we should focus on creating the right conditions for teams to actually thrive.
The right conditions.
Yeah.
Right?
And he outlines 4 key conditions that are crucial for team success. Having a real team.
Okay.
So not just a group of individuals, but people with clear roles that are interdependent on each other. A compelling direction that everyone buys into, an enabling structure that actually facilitates collaboration and support.
Makes sense.
And access to expert coaching.
So not just the leader, but other experts too.
It could be the leader. It could be people brought in from the outside.
Okay.
But just that knowledge and support is there.
It does make sense when you break it down like that, but it almost feels a little counterintuitive,
In what way?
Well, you would think that a team with a brilliant take-charge leader would outperform, one that's more focused on structure and collaboration.
It seems like it on the surface, right?
Yeah.
But think about like a symphony orchestra.
Okay.
You have a world-class conductor leading all these incredibly talented musicians.
Right.
But a lot of times those musicians feel very stifled. They feel like their work is just a factory job.
Wow. Yeah, that's a really interesting way to put it.
It challenges that romantic notion of leadership.
Right. So it's not just about the conductor's brilliance. It's about the whole structure, the collaboration, the environment.
The interplay of all these different factors.
And it makes you wonder what the ideal balance is.
Right. Is there even an ideal balance?
Yeah, and it gets even more interesting when you look at Hackman's research on airline cockpit crews.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he found that stable crews, meaning those who consistently flew together, actually performed better over time, which totally debunks that whole myth that familiarity breeds complacency.
It's almost like the opposite is true.
Right. Like the more they work together, the more they anticipate each other's moves.
Trust builds.
Trust. Yeah. And, their communication becomes almost seamless.
Exactly. It's like a well-oiled machine.
And it all ties back to that emphasis on team stability, that Hackman was talking about.
Yeah. It's not about constantly shaking things up.
Right. It's about finding that right mix of talent experience.
And creating an environment where they can really gel as a unit.
It really challenges a lot of assumptions about leadership and team dynamics.
It does. It shifts the focus from finding that hero leader to, creating an environment where everybody can contribute and excel.
So it's less about the individual and more about the system.
Exactly.
I like that. And speaking of creating the right environment, our next source dives into the importance of fairness in leadership. Yeah. This is Tom Tyler's work on procedural justice.
Right.
And, I think intuitively we all know that fairness matters. But is there more to it than that?
There is. It's a little more nuanced than just, treating people fairly.
Okay.
His research actually shows that people are more motivated by the fairness of the processes.
The processes.
Yes,
Interesting.
than by positive outcomes alone.
So it's not just about getting what I want.
Right.
It's about how I get there.
Exactly. It's about feeling like you were treated respectfully, that your voice was heard.
Even if I don't get the outcome I was hoping for.
Even then. Yeah, and this is where it gets really fascinating.
Okay.
This concern for fairness is deeply tied to our human need for a positive self-image.
Oh, that's interesting.
We want to believe that we're valued, that we matter.
I can see that.
And a leader who truly understands this psychological need is likely to be much more successful.
Not just because they're, giving people what they want.
Right. It's not about just handing out rewards.
It's about creating that culture of respect and transparency.
Exactly. When people feel like they're part of a just system, they're more likely to be committed, engaged, and willing to go the extra mile.
That makes total sense, actually, now that I think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the times I've felt most motivated at work, it wasn't always about, getting a bonus or a promotion.
Right.
It was about feeling like my contributions were valued and that my perspective was actually heard.
That sense of belonging.
Exactly. And that leads perfectly into our next source, which explores this whole psychological exchange between leaders and followers.
The exchange.
Yeah. Why do people choose to follow and why do people choose to lead?
Yeah. It's a really intriguing question, isn't it? Especially when you consider all the costs and risks involved.
Big time. David Messick tackles this question right.
He does.
I'm curious to hear what he has to say.
Well, he breaks down this exchange into 4 key dimensions. Achievement, belonging, security, and meaning.
So there's a lot more to it than just giving orders and taking charge.
Oh, absolutely. Messick suggests that leaders provide a sense of purpose, connection, protection, and significance.
And in return?
In return, they get their followers' loyalty and support.
I can definitely see how that would be motivating for followers.
Right.
But what about the leader in this exchange?
Good question.
It can't be easy to constantly be providing all of those things, especially under pressure.
Well, think about Ernest Shackleton for a moment.
Okay.
The explorer who led his crew through that incredible endurance expedition.
Right. Their ship got crushed in the Antarctic ice.
Exactly. Leaving them stranded thousands of miles from civilization.
Talk about pressure.
A true life or death situation.
So how does he fit into this?
Even in those incredibly dire circumstances, Shackleton maintained an unwavering belief.
In what?
In their ability to survive and return home. He constantly reassured his crew, planned meticulously, and adapted to the ever-changing conditions.
It's incredible that they survived.
It is. And it's a testament to his leadership.
Absolutely.
His ability to inspire hope and, a sense of achievable goals.
Right. Even when their original goal of crossing Antarctica became impossible, he gave them a new purpose, getting everyone home safely.
Exactly. He provided that sense of security and hope that Messick talks about.
Even when things looked completely bleak.
Precisely.
It's a powerful story.
It really is. But it's important to remember that this exchange goes both ways.
In what sense?
Well, followers aren't just passively receiving these benefits, They bring something to the table as well.
Okay, so what is it?
It's where the concept of reciprocity comes in.
Reciprocity.
Yes. Followers provide their loyalty and elevate the leader.
In exchange
for those benefits they receive. The achievement, the belonging, the security, the meaning. Yes. It's a dynamic interplay.
A two-way street.
Exactly.
It's so interesting how all of this, this exchange of achievement, belonging, security, and meaning can motivate both the leaders and the followers.
But I'm curious what happens when that power dynamic gets out of whack.
Okay.
Can the very things that make a leader successful also lead to their downfall?
Oh, that's a really crucial question.
Yeah.
And luckily our next source kind of delves right into that.
Okay.
It's all about the psychological effects of power and how it can really transform people for better or worse.
This is the research by McGee, Grunfeld, Keltner, and Galinsky, right?
That's the one.
And they found that power can actually make leaders more action-prone.
Yes.
Sometimes to their detriment.
It can be a bit of a double-edged sword.
Yeah, because, obviously taking action is important for a leader.
Absolutely. You need that drive.
But it sounds like it can go too far.
It definitely can. A bias toward action can be beneficial in certain situations.
Right.
But it can also lead to impulsivity and, a failure to sort of really carefully consider all the options.
So a leader who's always pushing for action, always needing to do something, might not always be making the best decisions. Right? They might jump the gun without fully thinking things through.
And McGee and his colleagues, they identify 3 specific effects of power that contribute to this.
Yeah.
Increased action we've talked about. But what about disinhibition?
Yeah.
I'm not sure I totally understand how that plays into this.
Think of it this way. We all have these internal brakes
that
keep our impulses in check.
Right.
They help us resist temptation and, act in socially appropriate ways.
Like conscience.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Disinhibition weakens those brakes.
So a leader with unchecked power might be more likely to take risks, bend the rules, or even act unethically.
Potentially. Yeah. Their internal stop signs aren't working as well.
And then there's that third effect, objectification of others.
Yes.
It's kind of scary to think about.
It is a little bit.
Like that a leader might start to see people as tools or objects rather than, individuals with their own thoughts, feelings, needs.
Unfortunately, it happens.
Right.
And it creates this very dangerous dynamic.
Right.
Where the leader's needs and goals totally overshadow the well-being of those they're supposed to be leading.
It's dehumanizing.
Very much so. So power definitely has some corrupting influences.
For sure. But what happens when a leader is gone? Does their legacy change over time?
It's interesting you should ask that.
Yeah.
Our next source actually looks at exactly that.
Okay.
How perceptions of leaders change after they die.
Okay, so Allison and Alon studied this and found something called the death positivity bias. Does that mean that we tend to view leaders more positively after they're gone?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
It seems like death kind of softens our criticism.
Maybe we're focused more on their accomplishments and less on their flaws.
Right, we remember the good.
And downplay the bad.
Yeah. But there is an interesting exception to this bias.
Oh, really? What is it?
Leaders who were judged as immoral during their lives are actually seen even more negatively.
After death.
After death, yeah. It's like their misdeeds become even more glaring once they're no longer around to defend themselves.
Almost like we're more willing to forgive incompetence than immorality.
Yeah.
It makes you think about how we judge historical figures.
Definitely.
Especially with all the new information that's constantly coming to light.
Right, like do we judge them by the standards of their time?
Or by our own modern moral compass?
It's complex. There are no easy answers.
But it's definitely something to think about.
Oh.
And our final source for this deep dive brings in a whole different perspective. The lens of social identity theory.
Yes. This is Michael Hogg's work.
Exactly. And I'm curious to see how this applies to leadership.
Well, Hogg argues that leadership is fundamentally intertwined with our sense of identity.
Identity.
Yeah. Leaders emerge, he says, by embodying the group's shared identity and ideals.
So they become like the poster child for the group.
In a way, yes. He uses the term prototypical.
Prototypical.
Meaning they represent the best or most typical qualities of the group.
Then that makes them relatable to the other members.
Absolutely. It creates a strong bond between leader and followers.
They see the leader as one of us.
Exactly. Someone who understands their values and aspirations.
But doesn't that mean that different groups would have different prototypes?
Of course.
Of what makes a good leader?
Leadership is highly context dependent.
Right. What works in one setting might not work in another.
Exactly. And that's where the concept of consensual prototypicality comes in.
Consensual prototypicality.
It's a mouthful.
I know.
It is? What does it mean?
It basically refers to how much agreement there is within a group.
Okay.
About what qualities define their ideal leader.
So the more agreement there is,
the stronger and more stable the leadership tends to be.
That makes sense. If everyone's on the same page about what they're looking for in a leader.
Exactly. It leads to less conflict and a clearer sense of direction.
But is there a downside to all this? There can be, picture it. A strong shared identity can also make the group resistant to change.
Oh, I see. So they might be less willing to accept a leader who doesn't fit the mold.
Exactly. It's like they're clinging to the familiar even when it's not working anymore.
It seems like there's a delicate balance to strike then.
There is. You need that strong sense of shared identity.
Right.
But you also need to be open to new ideas, new approaches.
Especially in a world that's changing so rapidly.
And leaders can actually play a role in reinforcing that shared identity.
Really? How?
They might highlight differences with outsider groups, emphasizing what makes their group unique and superior.
Right. Us versus them.
Exactly. Or they might call out members who deviate from the group's norms.
Oh, so it's a way of kind of solidifying the group's identity and strengthening the leader's position within it?
It's all about maintaining that sense of cohesion.
It's fascinating to see how these things are all interconnected.
It really is. They're a constant interplay between individual psychology and group dynamics.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, from the leader attribution error to that whole psychological exchange between leaders and followers.
It's been quite a journey.
It has. What stands out to you as maybe the most surprising or thought-provoking thing we've talked about?
I think for me, it's how much emphasis these researchers place on the psychological aspects of leadership.
Right.
It's not just about, giving orders or having some kind of magnetic personality.
It's deeper than that.
Yeah, it's about really understanding the needs and the motivations and even the perceptions of the people you're leading.
Like that whole idea of procedural justice.
Yes.
It's not enough to just give people a good outcome.
No. They need to feel like the process was fair.
Even if it means they don't get what they personally wanted.
Exactly. And it really challenges, some of those traditional ideas about motivation and rewards.
It all comes back to that human need for a positive self-image.
Mm-hmm.
We want to feel valued. We want to feel respected.
And a leader who gets that is going to be so much more effective than one who just relies on authority or incentives.
Makes you wonder if we sometimes romanticize leadership too much.
In what way?
Well, we focus on, those heroic qualities.
Right, the charisma.
Yeah, and we kind of overlook all these, subtler psychological dynamics that are at play.
I think that's a really good point. We tend to put leaders on a pedestal.
Yeah.
Attributing their successes to their brilliance and then blaming their failures on outside forces.
But it's never that simple, is it?
No, it's not. Leadership is this incredibly complex interplay of individual traits and group dynamics and all the different situations they find themselves in.
And even with the best of intentions, leaders can get tripped up by the power of their position.
We saw that with the research on power.
Yeah, that increased action, the disinhibition.
The objectification of others.
It's a lot to keep in check.
It is. It's a sobering reminder that power demands constant vigilance.
And self-reflection.
Absolutely. Which is why ethical leadership is so important.
Not just following the rules.
Right. It's about cultivating a deeper sense of integrity and responsibility.
For the people you lead.
Exactly. So, knowing all this research, what do you think makes a truly great leader?
That's a big question.
It is. For me, it's a combination of things.
Like what?
A deep understanding of human psychology, obviously.
Okay.
But also a strong moral compass
Mm-hmm.
and the ability to adapt to, whatever challenges come up.
So they have to be flexible.
Yeah, and they have to inspire and empower their followers.
Right, but also listen to them.
Exactly. It's not a one-way street.
And create a culture of trust and respect.
That's key. It's not just about achieving goals.
Right.
It's about that sense of shared purpose.
Like Shackleton.
Yes. He didn't just focus on getting his crew home.
He kept them going.
He gave them new goals to strive for.
Maintain that sense of camaraderie.
It's remarkable. And it reminds us that leadership is a journey.
With lots of twists and turns.
Absolutely. There's no magic formula.
And that brings us to our final thought for all of you listening out there.
And we talked about the legacy effect and how our views of leaders can change over time. But is it fair to judge historical figures by our own modern moral standards?
Oh, that's a tough one.
It is.
Especially with all the complexities we've been talking about.
Right, the power dynamics, the influence of the times they lived in.
It's definitely something to ponder.
It challenges us to think critically about, how our own values have evolved.
And to approach history with nuance.
With empathy and discernment.
Well said.
This has been an incredibly fascinating deep dive into the world of leadership psychology.
I've enjoyed it.
Me too. I hope this has sparked some new insights and questions for all of you.
And maybe even inspired some future leaders.
That would be amazing. Thanks for joining us.